purposes. By participating in this session, you are consenting to be recorded. If you do not wish to be recorded, please disconnect from the session. And just a little overview of ECHO. This is a participation-based community of practice. It is an interactive community, and we hope everyone can participate and share their thoughts and ideas. We do ask that participants are engaged in asking questions both after the didactic and also to provide feedback during our real situations, real solutions case. So the main components of an ECHO session, we will have a didactic speaker, then our real situations, real solutions presentation and discussion, and then we will break off into breakout rooms and discuss the presentation of the real situations, real solutions. Just a note, all of the next few sessions for the next, I think, 7 sessions will be based off of the Unpacking the Pyramid Model book. If you attend 3 ECHO pyramid trainings, we will send you that free of charge. So we're making sure to track that so everyone can get their handbooks. Additionally, everyone that attends, every time you attend, you will be entered to win a pyramid model classroom kit. We will be giving away 2 throughout the next few sessions, and it includes the Tucker Turtle Kit, the Problem Solver Solutions Kit, the Super Friends Kit, Classroom Visual Display, and Emotional Literacy. So it's a really great kit that helps just with having some additional resources to use in the classroom. We ask that you protect individual privacy when you're sharing information about another person or child. Avoid using any real first, middle, or last names or any initials. Don't identify any family members, friends, coworkers, email addresses. Make sure you de-identify any examples and situations. And if you are unsure of anything, you can contact a hub team member. They will be those with an asterisk before their name. And that's just a note for any of you that are hub team members. If you could rename it to have that asterisk so people know who you are, that would be great. For renaming your Zoom profile, you can go to the 3 dots by your name, and there should be a pull down tab that says rename there, or you can go to the participants. And we would love it if you could rename your name just to your name, your state, and your organization that you are with. We also highly encourage being able to use the raise hand function. This will just help so we can make sure we don't miss any questions. For pre-registration, when you pre-register for additional sessions, it allows you to receive any materials that we will have for the session in advance, if available. So if our didactic presenter has any materials they want you to have, or if we have anything from our case study, then we'll make sure to send those to you. So you can use this link on here or scan the QR code. And we will have this presentation up on our Canvas. So if you can't pre-register now, you will be able to register later. We do offer a certificate of attendance. In order to get this, you need to fill out the feedback survey. This is super important to us. We really want to make sure that these ECHOs are a good use of your time and that they're benefiting you and helping you increase your professional network. So we really appreciate every single feedback survey we get, and we will send that link in a few times throughout the session just to make sure that we can know that we're being beneficial. We do have a Canvas page. By registering, you will automatically be added onto the Canvas. And if you have any questions or difficulties accessing that, just email Faustine Sagany at f.sagany@usu.edu. For our real situations, real solutions presentations, we would love for anyone who's interested in presenting to email Sue Olson at sue.olson@usu.edu. This is a really great opportunity if your program is struggling in any way. So if you're struggling with staff buy-in ideas or ideas for finding time for staff to complete trainings, or if a teacher wants to know how to use a specific tool, or if there's some challenging behaviors that you've tried and you can't figure out how to help the child. So if that sounds like any of your programs, anyone you know, we would love for you to present so that way we can discuss and collaborate and try and find solutions. So I will let Ron present himself in just a minute. He is a research associate at the University of Denver, and we're very excited to have him present today. He will be presenting on part 2 of the supportive classroom environments. So for those of you who attended the last session, this will be a continuation, and it's just helping set up an environment to support the needs of all students. So thank you all for joining us today. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat throughout the session or unmute. And we're really excited for Ron to present today, so I will turn the time over to him.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. If you have not yet had a chance to drop your name, your affiliation, contact information, that kind of stuff into the chat, please do so they can make sure they give you any kind of credit and send in any information that you need for being here. We had a rush of people join in after Hannah started with her opening piece. So thank you all for being here once again. My name is Ron Roybal. If you remember, I'm from the University of Denver in Denver, Colorado. It is a little bit rainy here today. It's cooling down. It's supposed to be a mixture of rain and snow throughout. But it's a welcome thing right before our small little Thanksgiving break that we get. This is one of the few weeks I'm not traveling and jumping around everywhere because of the Thanksgiving break. So thank you for having me, and excited to dig into this next part. And really it is a building off of what we did last time with the breakdown and starting to look at all the pieces to this section. And so we'll just continue to build off of it and setting the stage for a lot of the other stuff that's going to, and I'll show you how it all connects, going to be presented on the rest of these sessions that you're going to be taking part in. Really we're trying to make that connection to it all, okay? My screen gets blocked, just let me know. I'm trying to organize it. So I'll show you how it's all connecting, how we're building off of it, and how it's all connecting to future events that you have. Plus, knowing a little bit what the community practice conversation is going to be about. I'll also talk to you a little bit about that as we go through some of this as well, so you can kind of make that connection all together. But remember, this is from the Unpacking the Pyramid book that you all will get access to with the participation, filling out the evaluation forms, things like that, and being part of all of this. That bigger package that's sent that Hannah was talking about is really cool. I got sent one of those as being part of a trainer, and I use it when I get out and train teams in a lot of the stuff as well, or when it's specific to what I'm talking about. So really cool stuff around that social emotional literacy piece. The pieces that we're going to be talking about in here today, again, is we're going to be building off of that, what we've already done. And if you remember the last time, we talked a lot about the routines within routines within routines. Just show of hands or thumbs up or something like that through your interactions, or you can put it in chat. Has anybody had time to play with this a little bit or help teams play with this a little bit? I see Annie shaking her head yes. How did that go? Or if you don't want to share any, that's totally fine. But how did it go, and what was the reaction?
Yeah, it went well. So I tried to talk about like what were those sticky situations that were kind of messy, those transitions, and having them identify like, oh, this is hard, like we need help with this. Okay, well, let's go through and break down what is the expectation? What is the expectation of that? How do we provide that consistency? And then they were already familiar with routines to the third from RP2. And so it was great to just go back and say, okay, let's go back and revisit this and kind of re-identify what are those routines and how we can make this more predictable. So it was great. It was great. And I love like after you put it in place, they're like, okay, things are going better. Yeah. So that we were able to see those changes from just re-identifying those routines.
That's great. And I'm glad you like threw in that last part on there, because one of the big things with any of this and implementation through any sort of implementation, and I'll throw out some terms. If you're not familiar with them or you want more information on it, please let me know. But this is all part of what we call implementation science. And there's an entire research area around what does it take to do implementation and the science behind it. And there is, as Annie was talking about, this piece of it, it goes in stages. And the initial stage is learning about some of this and hearing about some of this information. And then the next stage of that is trying it, but we might not be trying it and getting total success from it, but we have to play around with it a little bit, experiment with it, as sometimes this area is called, but it's the trying to implement until we see some success. And when we start seeing success, that's when staff get more and more bought in. The hard part on our job, or part of our jobs, mine in particular, is with the teams that I support with even this concept, is how do I introduce them to this? How do I get them to buy into this, to see some of that outcome? And that enables us to then build even more stuff off of that. So how do I then build in individual child support, or help with that transition process that helps each one move along to get to more implementation? Visuals for each step, expectations help too. Yeah, and that's what actually today is going to be about, is how do you take this routines within routines within routines and then start building those, let's say, expectations onto it. Because we have the routines now and they know what those routines are and down to those small little steps. But then what is the expectations that we have? And I will talk about this from a couple different points of view from this, and that is, what's the program expectations? And these can be those really broad things like being safe, keep yourself safe, keep your friends safe, let's be friendly with each other. Or, you know, I have one group, and I love this from this one group, they used an expectation or a program expectation of being a worker, because we don't always need, I mean, I what I loved about it is we don't always have to expect they actually accomplish what they're doing, but trying to do that and being a worker to get to that point is a huge piece. So those global expectations are talking about that within here. What does it look like to have those expectations within our routines, within our routines, within our routines? But that actually makes us think about this as in, what should be the realistic expectation for that routine within that routine within that routine? What's the realistic behavior expectation of what we expect children or students to be doing during that time? So if it's hanging up their backpacks, you know, if that's one of the things that's within our routines, within our routines, within our routines, is it that we really have an realistic expectation that they hang it up? Or initially, is it that they know how to take it off and be able to match it to their hook and not necessarily have the skills to put it on there? And that enables us to know where we provide that support, the support of helping them put it on that hook. Same thing with coats. If it's an expectation to hang up their coats, what is the realistic expectation that we would think of from this group at this moment in time? Is it just unzipping and taking that coat off and making sure it's ready for the next time we go to put it on, versus hanging it up and like matching the hood to the hook? So this is a huge piece when we start talking about all these little steps, and there's a lot of those little steps that we talked about last time on here, of those routines within those routines within those routines, and keeping adults a realistic expectations of what children's behaviors should be or can be, helps with that buy-in piece to say, oh, they are doing that, and now I can check that off my list and move to the next behavior expectation of actually matching that to there, or working on that dexterity to be able to match that backpack to that hook, to unzip my backpack, to take things out of my backpack. And all those little pieces fall into our routines within our routines within our routines that end up building off of all of this. That's why this becomes like a foundation piece that's so important. Important reference Annie's made, as well as going back and saying, Did this work? Yes, that reflective process to all of this work is that reflectiveness. It's part of practice-based coaching that we use and support our teams with, right? The reflective process, the building it, asking how it worked, and then problem solving on making sure that it's going to work eventually with it. What do you need support? This is the question I ask all my teams. What do you need from me to support you with that implementation? But that all starts with all of this. If you remember from our last session together, after we started breaking this down, I even said, look, if I'm going to support, let's say we have a child with severe challenging behaviors, I ask what routine or part of the day is the most challenging part? Arrival time. What part of that arrival time is so challenging for this student, whether it's going separation, transitioning in from parents, or off the bus, or finding their cubby, where their cubby is located, where their space is located, things like that, that then we can start thinking, okay, if it's that, what makes that difficult? Is it too much around that kid that we have to like maybe move that? So it starts informing us on our environmental arrangements. But it's only when we get to routines within routines within routines can we start asking those questions. If it's an individual child that needs some even, and I'm going to throw this out there, some IEP goals and objectives around social or communicative needs, functional communication systems, this is where we start thinking about where do we embed these in our routines within our routines within our routines. So this ends up being a supportive piece throughout everything that we're going to do. And that's why we started with this during our last session and how we're going to build off of it this session. But those little successes are huge in building that buy-in to all of this. Okay. But our routines within our routines within our routines start facilitating conversations that we have around how we set things up, and as what we call them, manage all those things that we are setting up. So going into classic classroom cases, we call this classroom organization and classroom management. How we set up our environments to support every child that walks in the door. And a lot of that has to do with visual supports and what visual supports are in the room that help answer those 4 questions that we talked about last time. What am I supposed to be doing? How do I know I'm making progress? How do I know when I'm done? And what do I do next? So our physical environment and the way we set it up with all those visual pieces, using print, using icons, using photos, all those things support the independence of children when they're in our environments. So what does that look like? And you can see this is why we ask teams to label shelves, label bins, so they can support that individualized cleanup, support their cleanup when they're done, taking them out, but also on inside of there, and you can see some of these have those additional visuals that go along with it that help answer the 4 questions as part of the use of those materials. What am I supposed to be doing with these materials? Building something with those. What does that look like? How do I know I'm making progress with that? And what does that look like when they're done? This morning, I was just talking to one of my groups about, and I made up a book, but let's just say they're doing something like chicka chicka boom boom, and I have these blocks out, whatever the blocks might be, and I want them to build a tree, the coconut tree, right? And so I have them, I could put out the Duplos out and show them through these steps, answering the 4 questions that are on there. How do I build a coconut tree using those blocks that I have put out? And I'm going to come back to all of this, but you can see down here on the bottom one, they're like maybe doing C unit, something like that. It's got a fish on there, and they have the board that shows it, but they show the steps on here. Now, this brings up a great conversation that usually comes up around this, around product-driven versus process-driven, right? And what I'm going to say is there is no requirement that these things are followed on here. So we're not looking for a product. But what this does is it supports folks that need help with those steps on what to do. And you can see on here, and it's not totally clear because it's small, but you can see on there, it's not this is the way it looks. It's on here as in these are the steps. You're going to use scissors to cut with. So there's some scissors on there. You're going to use a marker to write your name with or color these pieces. And you're going to use glue to glue on these pieces. So there's the steps that it takes to complete that, or the clear beginning, middle, and end to that. Annie, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to add in really quick. When you said that process versus product, a lot of times I get teachers who are very concerned about Eckers. And I really want to do this hand turkey that I've done for years, but Eckers won't let me. And so we're like, oh, guess what? That's math. Put it in your math center. And we're going to say, first, we're going to trace your hand. Second, and so we've added in those math concepts, which allows them to be able to still do their turkey, but it provides that visual support. So Tara's on here. I mentioned Wasatch, one of her classes, they've got this visual sign and it's steps to blow your nose. And she's got pictures of the kids doing it. And it's like those visual supports are so great, not only for our SPED kids, but for our typically developing children as well.
Yeah. We typically, I mean, even as typical adults, we use this. And I talk a lot about my travels because I travel all over the place. And if I'm in a land in an airport that I'm not totally familiar with, I look for visuals. I look for support that tells me which way is ground transportation and baggage claim as soon as I get off that plane, right? And I'm looking for those. So we use these constantly in universal supports ways. The group I was talking to this morning, I was talking to when they go to an intersection. Let's say you go to Target and you park in Target parking lot. There are some people that use the walkway that leads into the door. They walk over to that and they use that to cross over to get into the building. But that's there for everybody who wants to access it. But there's other people, there's people in my family, not necessarily me, that just start walking and they'll cross the street wherever they know they are looking out for cars, but they don't need to cross in the crosswalk. They just cross the street, seeing the traffic, what's happening out there, and they just cross over and go into the building, walk down the sidewalk and go into the building. That doesn't mean one way is right and one way is wrong. What it means is we all access information differently. And we have to set up the environments to give access to that environment for anybody who walks in our door. This means we're going to include some visuals with that. And some of it might be breaking down the steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. We can even use alphabets, A, B, C, D, but going in order. This is pre-literacy, going from top to bottom. Whenever you're reading anything, you read from the top to the bottom. So there's lots of positive around this. As long as, and we say this to adults, don't require it to look like that. It can look like a mess. It can look like they go and start gluing things on before ever cutting. If they do that, I'm totally fine with that. This is just to give an idea to those who need that extra support in doing that process. If they want to go to the blocks and not build the tree and just build something else, a car or something like that, I'm totally fine with that as well. I'm not requiring it. I'm saying it's there as an extra support. I don't know if you remember or if we talked about this in the last time, is like I asked how many people go to the grocery store and take a grocery list with them. And what do we do when we go to the grocery store with that grocery list? As we take an item and put it in our cart, we mark it off, right? But that visual, no, you don't, Sue. No, that visual of us doing all of that and those steps helps us answer those 4 questions, or that's part of our routine within our routine to go to the grocery store. But not everybody takes a list with them, and not everybody crosses it off. And that's okay. There's not one way to process through all of that. But for those that need that, they take it and they use it. And that's totally fine. And there's nothing wrong with that. But how the environment is set up is totally helps with all of that. This is what we're talking about with all of this, and the understanding of the breakdown of those routines within those routines and within those routines is to say, if we're doing something and we know our students and they need more support, the visual supports we provide are based off of those routines within those routines within those routines. So they're able to break that down. And this is part of knowing what that behavior expectation is going to be for those activities. What's the expected behavior for those activities? So there might be a visual for hanging up your backpack, taking it off. Might be a visual for hanging up your coat. Right now, and like in the state of Colorado and Utah's probably gets to like this as well, is all these days that they have to wear their snow boots and snow pants and hats and gloves and coats. What's the routine for taking those off and putting them somewhere where you're going to be able to access them again later? And what's the routine to putting those on? And we might be creating some visuals to support all of that. Breakdown, we call these activity schedules, breaking down all those little pieces, right? This is the one I'm going to highlight on here is down at the bottom. And you can see this is sign in, and there's differentiated instruction here on the sign in. Some are writing their names. So you can see like in the orange one right here, how it goes across, and there's a blank one across from it. So she can write her name. But others are using tracing or filling in the bubbles. And some are just using some basic writing strokes and just writing some basic strokes. So the differentiated instructions on here, but what this basically is trying to help us and determine here, and you can see all the photos of the next students who have not completed yet down here in the tray. What this visual tells us down here is breaking down that routine within that routine within that routine that says it's my turn to sign in. So I find my name, do whatever I'm going to do for signing in. And then when I'm done signing in, I'm going to pick a friend that still needs to sign in, go over and tell them it's your turn to sign in, and then I can get re-engaged with whatever the activity is, centers, arrival tables, small group, whatever that looks like. And that friend comes over and continues this process, and it just keeps rotating through them. But this visual helps them understand that so that adults don't have to give those directions, that it becomes more independent within that routine. Thoughts or questions about the use of these visuals and thinking about how we set these up? All of this is then takes into consideration, do they have ability to access this, access the environment, move around, which then gets us to that full inclusion piece that we're looking at. And how do we incorporate the environment to meet the needs of all students? So you can see all the visuals that are going on here within the support of this one student that's in our classroom that just needs all that extra support, but it is what we end up calling normalizing these supports. Like I said, not everybody crosses at the crosswalk going into Target, but they're there for everybody. So those that want to do that, it normalizes that, having that there. Same with a crosswalk, any other crosswalk, same with any other kind of visual support. I don't always access the visual supports when I go to a new airport, but they're there and part of the normal environment just in case that is a new place for me to help and support me with it. This leads us into how does this build off all the other stuff we learned, especially around pyramid model and foundational pieces. If you go back to the pyramid, it says that the foundation to all of this is the relationship that's built, right? And then what I tell all my groups is that kid in those kids, not even just one, but that those kids in that environment, if they think that adult does not like them, why would they ever participate in our routines? Why would they ever follow our directions, our expectations, or join in a group? They wouldn't. And so what we have to do is set up an environment routines within a routines within a routines, that there's less withdrawals and enables us to do more deposits to build that relationship. Routines in itself, if you remember the whole entire conversation with routines in itself, really leads to us being able to look at all of this and say, how do you become more independent with this so you don't have to depend on the adults to give directions? Because what we know about those directions is, if we look at here over here on the withdrawals from our emotional bank, what we know about those directions is they fall under what we call response demands. And response demands are withdrawals from their emotional bank. Every withdrawal works against our ability to build that relationship with those kids. So the more routines within routines within routines, and they're more independent within those routines, the less directions we have to give, the less withdrawals that we're making. And as we know with this, I'm going to go backwards, is this is a 5-to-1 deposits to withdrawal ratio, meaning for every one withdrawal, we have to have 5 deposits just to play even with our relationship building piece. So every time I give a direction, that's working against us and or making me work 5 times as hard to put 5 deposits into their emotional banks. And that's the perfect understanding of what these are, is what is a deposit? It's all those things that we talk about all the time, smiles, light touch, hands on the back, those kind of things, right? Saying things to them, commenting about what they're doing, modeling for them, expanding on what they're talking to us about, making those connections. I worked with a teacher who was really good about this. She really made those connections with kids and saying, oh, we have a connection. I did that this weekend, just like you did that. Or here's my coat and I hung up my coat. Noticing what they're doing and talking about it. That's the parallel talk that goes with that noticing or what you're doing. So there's all these pieces that need to be happening to build those ratios, 5-to-1 deposits to withdrawal. And that's just to play even, right? If we want to build that relationship, we have to go over 5-to-1, and it's closer to like 10-to-1 deposits to withdrawal. That means we really have to watch our withdrawals as we're doing it. And directions is one of those that falls under response demands. That's huge. Hannah says, I love that deposit ratio. I know negative comments stick in my brain more easily, yes, than the positive ones, and it makes sense that it's a 5-to-1 and not 1-to-1. This is very much so evidence-based. If you want to learn a lot more about this, it's an evidence-based practice. There's a group out of the University of Washington that does this in marriage counseling. And what they found is anything close to 1-to-1, that relationship's in serious trouble, right? It needs to be closer to 5-to-1 just to balance, 10-to-1 to build. Here's an interesting fact around all this, as we're right here, just really quick, is that 5-to-1, 10-to-1 is for normal interactions. Let's say that kid comes from a trauma background, that number goes up to closer to 20-to-1. So think about that in all the families' experience and all the children coming into our programs, how important that's going to be, is to continue to think about how important these deposits are, which then relates to routines. The more they know their routine and independent with their routine, the more they can do that by themselves, less directions from us, less withdrawals, enables us to really think about. And if you look at this one that I have, and I can provide this for you, we have our routines within our routines within our routines. And I put an extra column in here in case we need to go out any further. But then I have a section here that says, what's the deposit? What's the expected behavior that we're looking for? And how do we communicate that with children? If it's we want them to take off their coat, even if it's we want them to unzip their coat, we can say things like our behavior expectations, global ones, being a worker, keeping safe, being keeping our things safe, keeping our friends safe, right? Being responsible. We can build that into here by saying, look at how hard you're working to unzip your coat. Totally different conversation than unzip your coat, which is a withdrawal. But if you say, look at how hard you're working to unzip your coat, you're building that behavior expectation, but you're doing it in a deposit versus doing it in a withdrawal. But that comes from the breakdown of all of this. And we literally do work with everybody to say, what deposit are you putting? What's the behavior expectation for each part of our routine within our routine within our routine? And this goes even further as we start looking at all this, because we have our expectations, but then we have to develop the rules which support those expectations, right? And so we talk to our students and children about those rules that support those expectations. But this is not just done at large group time where we talk about those things. This has to be done in context throughout the entire day. And the way we do that is through that document, being able to list those out to say, what rule or expectations are we hitting and when are we doing that as adults, so we can teach these rules and expectations throughout the day, not just one time during large group time. We build it in across context. Thoughts, questions, comments about that? This brings us to another piece that you will eventually get to, the social emotional part of all of this building into there. I'm just hitting on it right here to say, these are the friendship skills that we know, right? Or that you're going to learn about, or that's part of the pyramid, the play organizers, them talking and giving those ideas. One of the things I stress about this and how it relates to everything that we're doing is those play organizers also act as deposits into those emotional banks. So every time you share an idea and they join in that idea, if I say, let's go, hang up your backpack right here. If an adult says that, that becomes a withdrawal from their emotional banks because it's a directive. If a peer says that, it's helping each other do that. It's a play organizer. It's sharing. They end up, it's assistance. So they end up supporting each other. This becomes deposits into their emotional bank, which is a huge change from the adult giving the directions. It changes those scenarios into positives or deposits into their emotional banks. So what we do with this and thinking about all these pieces is, how do we incorporate these in everything we do throughout the day? How do we incorporate these? Again, then we look at our form, our routines within our routines, within our routines, within our routines. And if we take that and we just say, what's the social opportunity using those skills that we talked about earlier or that we know of to say, how do Annie's example of transitions, how do we incorporate peers giving play organizers, giving assistance to other children within that transition? We might have one go get the other one and say, come over and line up with me. And that starts building that relationship between them. What spot do you want to stand on? Because we have visuals on the floor that help with those routines, within those routines, where we're going to go. Are we going to go wash our hands? One invites the other one to go wash together, and they support each other, giving each other soap, turning on water, rubbing them together, getting paper towels together, moving over to the trash can, moving over to the tables to eat our meal, whatever that looks like. It's how do we incorporate social opportunities? And again, we think it's a possibility to do this in every routine within a routine within a routine, and that adds more deposits into the emotional bank. So we have adults talking about expectations, making deposits. We have peers supporting other peers, making deposits. And therefore, these deposits get put into those emotional banks. So that enables adults to be able to later give directions, redirections, provide a little extra support, because now that 5-to-1 deposits to withdrawal ratio is in the appropriate realm or that appropriate ratio. But I say to people, this doesn't happen until we plan for it. We have to be very mindful about planning what that looks like. Thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about any of this? That's exactly what we're going for, Annie, is the intentionality to all of this. And we think about that with the intentionality to, let's say, to take something even more general, lesson planning, right? If we just put a general lesson plan out or just have a general idea of what's going on, do we really implement that or get to the outcomes we're looking for? It's the intentionality of what we're planning to get to the outcomes we're looking for. That shouldn't be any different for us as adults, is to what's the intentionality to all of this, our language, our interactions, our implementation. And this ends up being how we build off of all of that. Because we will miss some of those opportunities, as you put in your comment. Great point. Any other thoughts, questions about this? So to close out, what I'm going to do is show you a couple videos. And what I want you to look for in the videos, think about the routines and the routines within the routines within the routines. And also how, because a lot of these are related to then how do we embed some social opportunities to create some learning that's going on within these, okay? So look for those opportunities. Okay, so let me explain what they're doing really quick, and we might watch it because it's so short. This is part of dismissal. And so instead of an adult filling their folder that goes in their backpack to go home with any notes, anything that happened during the day, how they've set it up is that they have kids in charge of passing those out to other students to fill their folder. Now, they got their folder from another peer over on this side of the room, but the idea here is to get the interaction between each other within those routines. So the routine is part of collecting all your stuff and going to fill your backpack to go home, dismiss. I love how serious she is about her job. Like she puts it behind her. You're not getting this until we do this routine. So yeah, it makes classrooms a well-oiled machine. Do you see what the adult's doing over there? Like how much is she supporting those students into doing any of this? Like they're fully independent with this, right? A well-oiled machine. Now I eventually talked to her and the rest of the staff and saying, we're not going to stand around and being lurkers while we're doing all this. Gives you the time to set up things, get prepared, start to facilitate some learning and support that's going on. So there's lots of things that she could be doing instead of just standing there. But that's not a bad thing. That's part of this process, right? So let's look at another one, and it's part of the same dismissal.
Yeah, I didn't bring my food. What?
Can I have your superstar? You don't have a coat, are you sure? Can I have your superstar?
Can you catch what she's doing here? Yeah, right. So she's struggling with language and the formulation of that language. She's still developing that muscle, and she's in speech language therapy for all of that. But to include her, what we did is, this is basically the same routine as we saw just a second ago. But now what we can do within that routine, is then support her with that language development. And all this is a simple push button switch that when they come over, it gives her more of a voice. She's trying really hard to say their names, but it gives her the opportunity to participate in this, to be fully engaged in the interactions which build deposits between them. She's trying
Bring my
really
food.
hard to say their names.
What?
Can I have your superstar?
And then she pushes the button.
Can I have your superstar?
Thoughts, questions about that? And that's a pretty simple one, right? We have other ones that are even more complex.
Izzy, Jay.
Chase.
Tell him to put them.
We are put on J. We are put on J.
Now tap Izzy.
So what she's working and pointing to on there is what we call a core board, which has a lot to do with core communication, core words that children at this age should be using or could be using. And he struggles with his language and communication, but it's part of the routine that they're working together, building, giving assistance, as you can see, and working together to do something, which is just basic matching of shapes and numbers and concepts like that.
Izzy,
So
Jay.
pick one.
Chase.
Tell him to put them.
We are put on J. We are put on J.
And she's helping him to be able to complete it. But that's through all those visual supports that we talked about within that environment. The last one I'll show you, and I know I'm up against my time, and I want to give a few minutes for questions.
Swimming in the water, swimming in the water, swimming in the water. Four little fishies swimming in the water. Bubble, 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 bubble. There are 3 fish left. 3 little fishies swimming in the water, swimming in the water, swimming in the water. 3 little fishies swimming in the water. Bubble, 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 bubble. How many are left? 2 little fishies swimming in the water, swimming in the water, swimming in the water. 2 little fishies swimming in the water. Bubble, 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 bubble. Uh-oh. There's only 1 left. 1 little fishy swimming in the water, swimming in the water, swimming in the water. 1 little fishy swimming in the water. Bubble, 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 bubble. I like that.
So thinking about those routines, I mean, the routine within the routine within the routine, large group times, songs, child choice songs, right? The routine within that child choice song, she had a poster up there that counted down the number of fish every time they popped. But then those routines within those routines enable us to do things like add in her participation with the button, the switch, and you can see everybody, they don't move until she pushes that, and everybody pops. Thoughts, questions, comments? I see one comment in there. Love that teachers are planning for all students regarding their ability. Yep, this is what we try to do, is set up that environment to meet the needs of anybody that walks in the door. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? I left a little time in here for us to talk about any of this.
Can you talk a little bit about the planning for this? Like, is it beneficial for reflection after? How many people are involved in the planning? How do they communicate to all the staff that might enter the room?
Yeah, this is there's a lot of planning that goes into something like this. For these teams, there's an entire planning process just around what transdisciplinary teaming looks like. So that it's not necessarily, and I'm not picking on anybody here, but if we're like looking at those switches to sing the song, or for her to say, can I have your superstar, using the core board, that's usually something that's reserved for SLPs, speech language pathologists, to implement and support with, where we are saying we want it part of our routines, every one of our routines. But so that takes some transdisciplinary teaming to get everybody to understand how to use those and support those and make those readily available. So there's a lot of planning that goes around there, right? In fact, what we've learned through this entire process, part of buying into all of this, there's a lot more work that goes in the intentionality, as Annie was saying, of adults than the actual what it looks like once it gets put in place. It looks simple when we show a video like that, but there's a lot of planning that goes into it. Who needs to be part of that planning? We have our transdisciplinary team. Anybody who's going to be in and out of that room at any time, be totally a part of that planning process. It's just finding the time to be able to do that. Any other thoughts, comments, concerns? Yes. Betsy.
Do you share these videos? Are they proprietary, or if people are doing trainings, could they get access to these?
There's a few of the videos, not those ones specifically, and I cannot share those ones. And that's not necessarily preparatory rights, but that's more of like, do we have consent from parents to distribute videos of their children?
But there are others you think that would be available if we were doing trainings? And so can we email you to ask for access to those, or how would we find out about those?
Yes, you can email me, but Pyramid Model has a YouTube channel with a bunch of videos on there. So if you go to YouTube and you look up their Pyramid Model channel, there's a ton of videos on there, classroom implementation.
Specifically for children with disabilities, because I think, one of the things that I particularly like about these is it includes children with disabilities.
I think there are some there. We're getting more that to put up there as well. That's been a big push of what we're doing in the inclusion part of all of this.
Part of the equity.
Yes. So I wish I could give them out, but I can't always distribute them. Well, thank you. I hope that adds a few more tools to your toolbox, and it really did help with, I hope it helped with extending why those routine pieces were so important that we talked about last time, and how to continue to build off of there all the way through inclusion or equity for everybody, and making sure we're getting the rooms, environments set up for everybody that walks into the room.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ron, for being here today. And that was an awesome presentation. I hope everyone learned a lot. And we are going to move over to our Real Situations, Real Solutions case presentation with Debbie. Ron, you're welcome to stay for that, but you definitely don't have to. Debbie, are you ready to present?
I am ready.
Perfect. I'll turn the time over to you.
Okay, and do you have the video, the slide deck, or do I share it, or?
I do not. So if you could share it, that would be great.
Okay, I'm not on it. I'm gonna have to rejoin.
Debbie, I have it.
Okay, thank you,
I can
because
share.
I'm on my iPad and not my computer,
Let me
so,
go ahead and bring it up.
thank you.
Hannah,
Well,
she had sent it to me. I had failed to forward.
while
That's
you're bringing that up, could I put Tara on the spot just a little bit and ask her about that implementation? Did she stay on? don't see
I
her.
am here.
Oh, so yeah, when you're implementing like the routines to the third power in Wasatch, and I know Amy said you did see results from that. Can you talk about the results that you saw a little bit?
Well, I think for us, it was just the power of our staff having the same language. And then we saw the kids become more independent, right? And then work together. So I think it, from as a prior, like a special ed teacher mindset, it was what we do in our heads. But then to actually take it and write those routines out and have everybody in the team really diving deep and seeing all the steps that are involved in a simple routine, it just helped everyone be more aware, and then they can do more of those little positive, affirmations for the students that they're making growth and gains in their routines. Is that what you meant? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Betsy, before I get started on this, is Debbie, I think that when we implemented the routines to the third power in Jordan during RP2, what we noticed is just being able to support children at every step of the process. And we assume that, when we're arriving and we have a child who's misbehaving, that they're misbehaving through the whole process, when in fact, they might be able to hang their coat up individually, but they can't sign in because they don't have the skills to pick up the pencil or crayon or whatever. And then they don't know where to start that process. So I think for me, what was so great about the RP2 and hearing it again is just knowing where to support, where the breakdown is in the day, and not just assuming it's the whole arrival time, but there are certain steps along the way. That's what was kind of an aha moment for me in the process and our teachers as they implemented those. I don't know if that's what you've seen too at your place, Tara, or Amy for that matter. But we'll go ahead. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. So our Real Situations is Real Solutions is an experience that I've recently had as an internal coach. So I'm going to give the background information. This is an early intervention birth to 3 program. A couple of months ago, I've been meeting since July with the leadership team. But we did our first over Zoom meeting with the staff. There is over 80 people in this staff, but on each one of these visits, we've had around 50. But our first meeting with the early intervention team was held over Zoom. It was to introduce the pyramid model as a staff buy-in activity. So 89% of those attending the staff buy-in are either confident or like the idea of the pyramid model implementation after we did a staff buy-in survey at the end of the training. What we did during this training is just go over key components of the pyramid model and how it impacts children, what it looks like in early intervention. We let the team respond through questions, answers in the chat. We had 3 responses of the group that indicated that they felt that the pyramid model would be beneficial, but they did not want to participate. We had one pretty heavy response during that staff buy-in that really felt like that there were not evidence-based practices to support the implementation. And I'll get on that in a little bit as we move forward. The second meeting was just recently, also with the early intervention team, module training. So what we did is the way this team, that a leadership team, because of the intensity of the services that early intervention provides, this team is really busy. So they're trying to implement these trainings. So over Zoom in a group based on their location. So there are 4 different sites, and each one of those sites has a site facilitator who will also function as the pyramid model coach. So in this particular one, we had everyone together. We did module training lesson 1. So module 1, lesson 1, which was an overview of the pyramid model. It was a large group over Zoom, 50 participants. So the team consists of physical therapists, occupational therapists, service coordinators, speech language pathologists, and special education teams, teachers. The majority, go ahead, Sue, and go to the next one. So what the concern or problem here is that we, at the end of the trainings, so this will be the last one that's in a large group where everybody is together. From now on, they'll be site-based. They'll still be over Zoom. They'll all be together. They won't be over Zoom. They'll all be together, and the site facilitator will push a button and they'll watch the modules, but they're only watching one lesson at a time. So it's going to take several months to complete. But what my concern is in our last meeting, we had a very resistant staff member. So the staff member was very vocal in saying that they do not believe the pyramid model uses any evidence-based practices, that they won't benefit her as a provider, that she already is doing evidence-based practices in the services that they're providing already. What they would really like to see is a published study about the evidence-based practices. Believes that they're already using them. They're very vocal about not wanting to participate. So the situational piece here is that the leadership team has decided to begin the training on the pyramid model without much staff input. So they have their core leadership team, but what they really want is that everyone gets the training. When we did our staff buy-in, 89% of the staff believed in or wanted to be a part of the implementation. What the implementation science supports is the 80% to begin with, and we had 89%. So we well met that expectation. So like I said, they have very highly qualified staff. They either have a bachelor's degree, some have master's degree, and some have doctorate degrees. What I feel like maybe is that staff may feel that their knowledge isn't already valued as a result of us, that we're not thinking or valuing what they might already know. I'm not really sure, but we do have 3 or 4. We have one very resistant, about 3 or 4 others that are a little less resistant than that person. Sue, go ahead. So what we would like is, so during this situation, our first meeting, the staff wanted a PowerPoint for all the online modules. So we are developing those. We're developing knowledge checks built in for them, as well as evaluation tools for each site. There are 4 sites. Each has a site facilitator. No center-based services happen at this facility. They serve children birth to 3 with developmental delays. All future trainings will be held at each 4 centers. There will be a site facilitator. Starting in January, the team will watch one lesson they'll watch module 1, lesson 2, module 1, lesson 3, etc. down the line. So that's how that's going to be. So what we'd like to see today, does anybody have any questions thus far? Your help will be very much appreciated. Just because this isn't unique to one site, we are having some pushback with other early intervention sites as well. Go ahead, Sue. So what we'd like to have the discussion about today is ideas for helping staff know they're valued and that the pyramid model implementation is for the support of the children and families that they serve. Ways to support or value professional development as a benefit to the whole program. So we want them to know that, you know, within their expertise, there are people who have just been hired to people who have given many years of service. So we want to be able to value the professional development as a whole for the whole program and how that benefits everybody at different levels of their expertise. Suggestions for resistant staff, how we might move them along in the process, and any additional implementation strategies that you might have for highly qualified staff members, you know, like should we roll out this differently? Should we involve more people in the team, in the whole team, leadership team process? So my hope is that as we break in these breakout sessions, that we'll have some discussions on these 4 topics. Any thoughts? I'm really looking forward to your expertise, people.
Thank you so much for that, Debbie. I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts for this. So if you have any follow-up questions, you can feel free to send it in the chat and we'll be going around and making sure Debbie can answer those. And I just want to sum up to make sure everyone understands the case clearly. So you have an organization that's across 4 different sites, and most of the people are on board with using the pyramid model program, but one team member is very vocal about not wanting to use it and not believing that it is evidence-based practices. So you want ideas for helping staff know the value of the pyramid model, ways to support professional development, suggestions for that resistant staff member, and any other implementation strategies. Did I sum that up okay?
You did perfect.
Perfect. So now we will move into breakout rooms. I believe we have Tara, Alda, Alda, Betsy, and Wendy will be our facilitators for today. Just a note, we would love for all of you to be on camera just so we can have more of that personal connection and connect better with each other. And just a reminder for the hub members, if you could assign someone to take notes, and then that note taker will send those notes to Faustine so we can get those to Debbie. And we'll be back for a group discussion after a few minutes of breakout room discussion. Oh,
Hannah?
sorry.
That's
Yes.
okay. I stuck the questions from the last slide in the chat. I don't know if somebody from each or the facilitators want to grab those or take a quick screenshot or
Yes,
stuck
and
them in there.
Alda, could your group focus on the first question first? You can move on to other questions, but just focus on the first question first. And then Betsy, could your group focus on the second question first? Wendy, could your group focus on the third question and then move on to the other questions? So either you or your note taker can just say 1 or 2 things.
Well, Sue jumped in as a really good note taker, so I'll let her highlight 2 or 3 things from her list.
Could you remind us what the question was as you give your answers?
So the question that we addressed was ways to support or value professional development as a benefit to the whole program. And So we looked at real quickly that we have to validate staff, that we verbally say, we know you know what you're doing, that we appreciate your knowledge, and that will support the program as a whole. We acknowledge that they might be burned out, and Alice said, help to normalize the training and support people to embrace the practices in their own way, in their own time frame. We talked about that this provides us with a common language, because what BI is made up of a variety of people with different education, different backgrounds, different trainings, and rarely do they come from family-centered services or coaching practices. So in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Sue. Now we will move over to Betsy's group.
Well, somehow we got our wires crossed because we did the same one.
Oh, well.
I think it and number one, ideas for helping staff know they are valued, are kind of in the same realm there. Anyway, we'd love to give them extra pay. We'd love to give them extra time off. We would love to have a public acknowledgement of completed trainings and implementations, certificates, thank yous, chocolate. All of those things never hurt. And just developing a culture so that where there's a motivation to try new things, that the kind of go-getters will be motivated to try these things and become see the value and bring others along. So
awesome. Thank you.
And look how different yours were from ours. So perfect.
And finally, we'll move over to Wendy's group. Oh, I believe you're still on mute.
Sorry. We looked at suggestions to move a resistant staff member along in the process. Put them on a leadership team. Have them create a PowerPoint with evidence-based research about pyramid model. Find out the underlying reason that they are resistant. Differentiate learning for them. Rely on the power of peers. Use the momentum of the rest of the group. And possibly it's a supervisory issue and needs to be dealt with that way.
Well, thank you all so much for your participation today. Just another reminder for those of you that took notes, if you could send them to Faustine. And if you're interested in presenting one of the real situations, real solutions presentations like Debbie did, if you could email Sue Olson at sue.olson@usu.edu. We are looking for a case presenter for next month, and we would love to have you. And our next ECHO session will be December 18th. Same time, 1 to 2:30, and it will be on emotional literacy. And just a little tech reminder, if you do sign up and you get that confirmation email from Zoom, you do have to download the registration confirmation to make that show up on your calendar. So thank you all for joining us today. We'll stay on Sue?
Real quick, I just want to say, Tweety Yates is the presenter for the next 2 months, and there's no one better who knows pyramid and knows especially early intervention components. So spread the word and we'll get more invitations out there, but she's an amazing presenter.
Yes, please make sure to invite everyone who might be interested, any coworkers, or share with your professional networks. And we hope to see you in December, and we'll stay on if anyone has any questions, but other than that, thanks for coming today.